Hello, my name is Dr. Evan James Gowan, but you can call me Evan. Welcome to the Raised Beaches podcast. This podcast will discuss topics related to paleoclimate, earth science, and global change. This is episode 1, so first, I'll give an overview as to the format of this podcast. So the introductory part of the podcast, I'll discuss some topics that are relevant to whatever I've been looking at over the past few days before I record the podcast. The second part, I'll give a deep dive into some concept related to paleoclimate and global change. After that, I'll give a more casual discussion about the references that I used for that specific topic. Finally, I'll give an overview of some recent papers that I found interesting. Now first, you're probably wondering who is Evan Gowan? Well, here's a bit of background into how I got to be a paleoclimate scientist. I did my undergraduate degree in the University of Manitoba from 2000 to 2005. Manitoba is in central Canada, if you don't know where that is. In that degree, I studied geophysics. Didn't really have much to do with climate at that point. I studied, for my honors thesis, a geophysical technique called magnetotellurics. This is a geophysical technique that measures natural electrical and magnetic fields to determine the properties at tens of kilometers below the surface. After that, I decided to do a master's degree. I went to the University of Victoria in British Columbia. It was there that I began to get interested in paleoclimate topics. Even though I was at the University of Victoria, I was mostly located at the Geological Survey of Canada. For my master's thesis topic, I was initially mostly interested in the properties of the mantle, which is several tens of kilometers below the surface. However, to investigate the mantle, we used a technique called glacial isostatic adjustment. I will talk about that in one of my main topics in a future episode. So with glacial isostatic adjustment, basically what that is you load ice on the surface during a glacial period, and that deforms the Earth, and that will also affect sea level. So my master's topic, half of it was about determining the sea level history of Victoria, and the other half was deducing the size of the ice sheet through the modeling the glacial isostatic adjustment response of the Earth. After that, I went into the private sector, specifically the mining industry. I wanted to make some money, and also I didn't want to go straight into a PhD. Anyway, that turned out to be a little bit of a disaster because while I was working in the mining industry, the 2008 financial crisis happened, and eventually all the jobs sort of dried up. After that, my boss recommended that I should pursue a PhD because he didn't think things would improve anytime soon, and he was kind of right. And anyway, having lived in Canada all my life, I decided it was best to go overseas somewhere to pursue my PhD. And so I went to Australia, the Australian National University. The Australian National University is a very famous university in the history of earth sciences because it was one of the first major institutes that accepted the theory of plate tectonics. It also has a long history of climate science, and I wanted to continue my interest in ice sheets and glacial isostatic adjustment, and that was a good fit for me. As it turned out, my supervisors decided that because I was from Canada, I should pursue a project related to the ice sheet history in North America, It was right in my backyard where I grew up, all of the data that I used. But I was in Australia, so that was kind of funny in some ways. So anyway, I did my PhD between 2010 and 2014. And after that, as is pretty common for people who want to pursue an academic career, you start to do a postdoc. For that, I went to Stockholm University, and that was a bit of a change of pace. So instead of looking at glacial isostatic adjustment, I moved into modeling ice sheets. And my postdoc in Stockholm University in Sweden was a bit short. It was about a year and a half, but I learned a lot about ice sheet modeling. So how does an ice sheet flow? How does it respond to climate? So that was a very important introduction for some of the stuff I did later on. In 2016, I got a postdoctoral position at the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany. So you may have heard of Alfred Wegener because he discovered the concept of continental drift when he found out that South America and Africa kind of fit together in a perfect, like a puzzle piece, basically. However, Alfred Wegener was actually a very famous polar scientist, and in fact, he died while he was on top of the Greenland ice sheet. So this is a pretty exciting place to be if you're interested in ice sheets. So I spent 5 years in the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany, and the first couple of years, I was primarily focused on doing more ice sheet modeling, and in particular, I was interested in how changes to the conditions at the ice ground interface affect the sliding and history of the ice sheet. And after that, I worked on a project that was more related to glacial isostatic adjustment, sea level change. And in that project, I ended up going to Argentina, and that was a lot of fun. And I learned so much. And I also got started in compiling sea level constraints of the past. And that has culminated in me making a database, an online database called the Global Archive of Sea Level Indicators and Proxies, or GAPSLIP. And that has been something that I've been working on a lot lately. So after 5 years in Germany, I ended up moving to Japan in 2021, and I took a 2-year postdoc at Kumamoto University. Now, most people probably don't know where Kumamoto is, and part of the reason I moved here was for family reasons. But of course, I love Japan, and it's great that I'm able to live here. And in this 2-year postdoc, I was working with Dr. Tomita, who's interested in the rainy season, which happens in June usually. I say that now as I'm recording this in mid-June, and it's supposed to be the rainy season here, and it is very dry and hot. But anyway, our project was mainly to look at what the changes in sea level during the last glacial maximum about 20,000 years ago, and how that impacted the rainfall patterns in Eastern Asia and Japan. That's pretty interesting. Still not quite done. I've got paper revisions still to write up here, so wish me luck on that. That finished up about 1 year ago, and since then I've been still associated with Kumamoto University, Dr. Tomita has been very generous and given me some support to maintain my affiliation there. And I'm really appreciative of that, of course. And but yeah, the past year I've been doing lots of traveling and lots of pondering about what I should do for the future, because after almost 10 years of doing postdocs, I feel like the next step needs to happen. And of course, getting a permanent position in academia in 2024 is very difficult. There's not a lot of positions, and as a result, I experimented with a few different things. I pondered going into the private sector, and I thought about, well, what's hot now, of course, is the AI and machine learning, and I even bought some textbooks on that and pondered, should I do that? And I decided, by the time I teach myself how to do machine learning and AI techniques, that this fad, I'm calling this AI thing a fad, might be over. So yeah, it would take some time, and I don't know if I would enjoy all of the programming. I can do programming, but it's not my favorite thing to do. So I also, considered, of course, I continue to apply for things, but there's not a whole lot available right now. I decided instead, why not try striking out on my own and start a podcast? And, I've been thinking about doing a podcast for years, and the reason I never did it is because I assumed it would be a very time-consuming thing, and that's very true. And but yeah, I'm unemployed, so I have all the time to be able to do that. And so yeah, I decided, let's do this. I got the fancy microphone and the lights, and I'm recording. So after I decided to do that, I saw this really interesting video by noted physics YouTuber Sabine Hossenfelder, where she basically had a lament about why she stopped being an academic and started to be a YouTuber. And having been through the German system, I very much sympathized with what she went through. And yeah, and she said, unless you are working on the hot topics, it's really hard to get funded. And that's so true. I submitted funding to the Japanese funding agency to continue doing my research, and guess what? It didn't work out. I published a paper that is probably one of the most cited earth science papers published this decade, and even then it was not possible to get funding. And of course, right now everything is all AI and machine learning, so your chances of getting funding are probably higher if you do something like that. But for what I want to do, that I think it's the wrong approach. So that's just how I feel, and nothing's going to change that. And anyway, with a podcast, I get to talk about what I want to do, and I hope that everybody will enjoy this. And I'm very excited. Of course, before I move on, I'd like to give some thank yous. And first off, I'd like to thank Aruj, who made my great retro 16-bit logo. It's perfect for what I wanted to do. It shows me holding a GPS unit, measuring a raised beach. And I'd like to thank Sean, who created the nice 16-bit style theme song. And course, I'm a big fan of the Super Nintendo, as you might imagine if you know me. And yeah, I absolutely am very thankful that they were able to do such a great job. And I think the retro theme really suits the Raised Beaches podcast, which is about paleoclimate. Of course, I'd also like to thank that blasted Salami. He's a Tekken YouTuber and creates great guides for Tekken, and he's given me, so Arya, his name is, he's given me lots of advice about how to get this set up, including the equipment that I need, and I'm very happy he's been able to help me out. And of course, I'd like to thank Dr. Tomita at Kumamoto University, and he's been supporting me the past few years, and I definitely would not be able to get started on this without his support. So anyway, the next thing I'd like to talk about is the Japan Geoscience Union conference, which I went to in the last May 26th to May 31st, and I'm recording this on June 15th, and so it's been a couple of weeks since it's been over, and by the time you listen to this, it'll probably be a bit later than that, but I hope that you enjoy listening to some of the highlights that I thought were definitely worth mentioning here. So for anybody who doesn't know about scientific conferences, like, of course, you get to learn about the latest science, and in Japan, there's lots of great earth science going on. The Japan Geoscience Union conference is more of a local conference, so a lot of the sessions are in Japanese, and of course, I do know some Japanese, but for me, the main benefit is to learn some of the Japanese jargon of earth science, and that's always fun. But yeah, one of the main reasons you go to a conference is to network and to meet new people, and you want to sort of advertise what you're doing. Like, if nobody knows who you are, they're unlikely to read your papers. That's just the reality. It doesn't matter how good your stuff is. If nobody knows who you are, they probably will not notice your research. So I gave a presentation on my my sea level database called GAPSLIP, or the Global Atlas, or Global Archive of Sea Level Indicators and Proxies. And if you look at this channel, I made a video of that if you want to watch more of that. The highlights, perhaps the biggest highlight in terms of presentation that I saw was a presentation by Takuya Itaki. And in that presentation, he was showing off this machine learning techniques for detecting radiolarians in thin section slides. So a radiolarian is a type of plankton that you find in the ocean, and this settles down onto the ocean floor. And yeah, counting these by a human, like a person, it's very tedious. So basically what he's done is created a machine learning technique to identify these radiolarians using a computer. And it's not perfect, but it's got a 90% success rate. So basically it makes it possible to do very high resolution counts in a sediment core. And that's very exciting, because he's like, the machine learning tool it takes about 48 hours to do something that would take a person like 2 years to do. So it's very exciting. I'm sure this can be used for a lot of different proxies. there was a Pacific Islands Holocene session, and for me, the highlights were the tsunami, the tsunami talks. So on the Pacific Islands, they were looking at what past tsunamis, like rocks that had been washed up due to the tsunamis, and one of the alarming things was that there were this tsunami that happened in the 15th century, and this was caused by a subduction zone called the Tonga Trench, and obviously, if that ruptures again, it'll be very devastating for the Pacific Islands regions, and probably places like Australia and New Zealand. So it's definitely something people need to be aware of. In the ice core session, there was a presentation by Ikumi Oyabu, and her presentation was to refine the age of the last interglacial in the Dome Fuji ice core. And what they found was the last interglacial, the peak warming of it happened about 128 to 132,000 years ago. And they also estimated what the change in temperature relative to present was. And it was a bit lower than the previous estimates. And it was actually a bit closer to what is estimated from climate models, which is very encouraging if you want to trust the climate models. Stefan Hetzinger presented a new proxy record based on coralline algae that forms on rocks in Greenland. And by measuring the magnesium and calcium ratio of these coralline algae, he can find out the water temperature. And by measuring the barium calcium ratio, you can detect the amount of runoff coming from the Greenland ice sheet. And so basically every year there's a new layer of this coralline algae that forms on the rocks. And this is important because we only have records of the Greenland ice sheet melt going back, a couple of decades, or maybe 3 decades or so. So these records can go back a bit further back in time. So that's really nice. Another study that was presented was by Tsung-Mi Hu, and he reported on a speleothem, which is a stalactite. It's a carbonate rock that forms in caves. And this was a speleothem from northern Italy, and it provided a high-resolution record from Marine Isotope Stage 11. And this period is interesting because it happened about 400 to 420,000 years ago, and it's assumed that this is the warmest period in the past 3 million years or so, and therefore it's sort of a proxy, or it sort of will work as a way to understand what would happen in a warmer world. And for me, the big point of that presentation was that the interglacial conditions, so the warm conditions that are similar to present, were reached by 425,000 years ago, which is earlier than what has been assumed before based on marine records. So I think that it's going to be a very important study, at least for some of the stuff that I work on. Another poster presentation was by an honors student named Catherine Melissa Smith, and I looked up all the abstracts for paleoclimate sessions, and of course this one popped up because it had my name on it in the abstract. So what she was looking at was some corals from Kikaijima, which is an island in southern Japan, which is rapidly uplifting. And this island, I'll talk about Kikaijima in a future episode because I plan to go there in the next month or so. And she got some samples from this period known as Marine Isotope Stage 3, which is between 27 and 57,000 years ago. And these coral samples she found, she tried to find a date from them. And based on what we know about the living depth that the corals live in below sea level, you can sort of deduce what the past sea level was. And of course, her supervisor is Dr. Yusuke Yokoyama, and we don't always agree on the interpretation of some of these records. So we were kind of joking that the student, she was going to defend her thesis just a couple of days after the presentation, that she had already done her defense by talking to me. But anyway, I really hope she did well. Another poster that I saw was interesting was by Yijing Zhang, and he was investigating a sediment core that was taken from the Kanto Plain, which is fairly close to Tokyo. And anyway, this is a very long sediment record stretching back the past 400,000 years. And the Kanto Plain is slowly uplifting due to tectonics, but it's still fairly slow. And what was interesting to me, of course, as a sea level researcher, is that they found several fluctuations of sea level, which are related to the glacial cycles. And of course, I will definitely be looking into that a bit more for my own interest. Another presentation on sea level change was by Satoshi Sasaki. And so the Japanese government has a research base in Antarctica called Showa Station. And Sasaki-san was investigating what is known as an isolation basin. So basically the land in that area is slowly uplifting because of the unloading after the ice melted away. And this will be something I discuss more in a few minutes. So this lake is called Lake Funazoko, and basically, because the land is uplifting, they wanted to know, was it connected to the ocean at some point? And they found out by investigating the sediments from the lake that this lake was connected to the ocean at about 2,000 years ago and prior to that. So that's interesting information if you want to deduce the size of the ice sheets in the past. So anyway, I had a really good time at the Japan Geoscience Union conference, and I met all my great colleagues and met some new colleagues that maybe I'll work with in the future. And I can't wait for the next conference. I always have a good time. And anyway, next I will be on to the main topic, which will be what are raised beaches.